If you think you already know how the story of ice and fire ends, guess again, because the winds of winter are blowing.
Why? Wondered Tyrion. Meereen is long leagues across the sea. How has this sweet child queen offended old Volantis? Sweet? If even half the stories coming back from Slaver's Bay are true, this child is a monster. They say she is bloodthirsty, that those who speak against her are impaled on spikes to die lingering deaths. They say she is a sorceress who feeds her dragons on the flesh of newborn babes, an oathbreaker who mocks the gods, breaks truces, threatens envoys, and turns on those who have served her loyally. They say her lust cannot be sated, that she mates with men, women, eunuchs, even dogs and children, and woe betide the lover who fails to satisfy her. She gives her body to men to take their souls in thrall. Oh, good, thought Tyrion. If she gives her body to me, she is welcome to my soul, small and stunted though it is. They say, said Halden. By they, you mean the slavers, the exiles she drove from Astapor and Meereen. Mere calumnies. The best calumnies are spiced with truth, suggested Cavo. But the girl's true sin cannot be denied. This arrogant child has taken it upon herself to smash the slave trade. But that traffic was never confined to Slaver's Bay. It was part of the sea of trade that spanned the world, and the Dragon Queen has clouded the water. Behind the black wall, lords of ancient blood sleep poorly, listening as their kitchen slaves sharpen their long knives. Slaves grow our food, clean our streets, teach our young. They guard our walls, row our galleys, fight our battles. And now, when they look east, they see this young queen shining from afar, this breaker of chains. The old blood cannot suffer that. Hey there, it's LML, and I'm here with Quinn, and that was Cavo, a customs officer from Selhorys, talking to Tyrion and giving us a pretty good setup, actually, of the situation in the east regarding both Volantis and the slave trade. And for a little more on that setup, here's Quinn.
So Daenerys has kind of like kicked the hornet's nest in Volantis. And you see in that quote, they kind of present all these like false reasons why they might hate Daenerys. But the real reason is that she's upset the slave trade in the East, which Volantis is pretty much the center of.
Yeah, I don't think Volantis has any problem with like blood magic or blood bathing or hedonism or whatever.
It's all propaganda.
Nah, it's propaganda. Yeah, the real reason is the slave trade. It's a very real reason. They talk about it both in Slaver's Bay and in here in Volantis. And you can see at the end of Dance, all the various armies from all around, basically the entire East, everyone with a stake in the slave trade has sailed to Meereen to do battle to Dany. And Volantis is kind of the epicenter of this. So as you can see from that quote, it really does seem like this is a plot line George is going to pick up,
Yeah, so the old blood is very afraid of Daenerys. They've sequestered themselves behind their famous black walls, which are potentially fused stone.
Yeah, I look at those things. Well, they are fused stone, and when I look at them, I tend to think they look a lot like Harrenhal's black walls. Mm-hmm. and like you said, conveniently, all the people Dany would want to roast are kind of gathered inside one place.
What they should have learned from Harrenhal is that walls don't protect you against dragons, because dragons can fly.
That's right, and we're going to actually read a little bit of the Harrenhal quote in a minute to sort of get a taste of that sort of terror and destruction that dragons can cause. So, the main thing here is that like we said, inside the black walls, it's only the old blood and their slaves. So in order to have a clean, quote unquote, a morally clean city burning here, or at least inner city burning, we would need to get these slaves out.
Which they are prepared to do.
Which they're prepared to do, right. And we're going to talk about just all the ways in which that is prepared to happen. So this looks like a pretty good setup that both something is going to happen here at Volantis, and more specifically, we're going to get a good old city burning.
And of course, Dany roasting the slave lords in Volantis is not the same as her burning King's Landing, because they're not good people.
Right, this will be a city burning that we can actually cheer for.
We can cheer for this.
So that's going to be good. And last point on the setup is that this is a very rich city. Dany has all these troops and freed slaves. They need food. They need supplies.
Gold.
This is basically like a city full of Mario power-up boxes. They bloop, bloop.
Yeah, like a lot of wealthy stuff.
Mushrooms and flower power-ups for everyone. You get a star. You get a star. And so now for a little more detail here as far as, how ready Volantis is for rebellion, we're going to check out some quotes from Tyrion's time in both Selhorys and Volantis in A Dance with Dragons. So, the first one, we're going to hear a little bit about the Red Temple, how they've been preaching that Dany is the chosen one, and more specifically, the Widow of the Waterfront tells Tyrion flat out that a slave rebellion is just waiting to pop off in this quote here.
You want to be gone from here before the tigers come. Should you reach your queen, give her a message from the slaves of old Volantis. She touched the faded scar upon her wrinkled cheek, where her tears had been cut away. Tell her we are waiting. Tell her to come soon.
So you can see here, as we said before, the slaves are ready to rebel at any moment as soon as Daenerys gets there. I think Daenerys will have a lot of help in Volantis coming from the slaves, at least.
Yeah, those are actually the last words of that chapter, too. So it's very ominous. Tell her to come soon. Like,
Yeah.
okay, this is something that's definitely going to happen. And that's why we chose this
Yeah.
for one of our 23 most anticipated plot lines.
It's like, we're ready, we just gotta wait for her to get here.
Right. One presumes. And it's right on the way. So going back to Tyrion's conversation with Cavo, the customs officer from Selhorys, about how Volantis can abide Dany, we hear more about the slave versus master's dynamic there. And I'll just sum this up real quick. It says, poor men hate her. Even the vilest beggar stands higher than a slave. This dragon queen would rob him of that consolation.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it's about like the class struggle and how like you have the upper class that kind of like pits the bottom classes against each other.
Exactly.
Because you have like the poor people and the slaves are beneath them, so they always want someone to kind of look down on because their lives are miserable.
Exactly. You can see that the Volantis has this social order that's carefully designed to keep them in power, and one of those elements is turning the downtrodden against the very downtrodden, if you will. So,
Exactly.
And Dany's upset even that, shining like a beacon from the east. I mean, it's really pretty clear language there. So, the next quote we've got, it comes from Bonero, and he is essentially preaching about Dany. And although we heard Tyrion sum this up, we thought it was worth going in and getting the actual preaching, because I mean you can smell the rebellion in this quote.
Yeah.
Tyrion advanced his spearmen. Cavo replied with his light horse. Tyrion moved his crossbowmen up a square and said, "The Red Priest outside seems to think Volantis should fight for this Silver Queen, not against her." "The Red Priest would be wise to hold their tongues," said Cavo Najares. "Already there has been fighting between their followers and those who worship other gods. Bonero's rantings will only serve to bring a savage wrath down upon his head." "What rantings?" the dwarf asked, toying with his rabble. The Volantine waved a hand. In Volantis, thousands of slaves and freedmen crowd the temple plaza every night to hear Bonero shriek of bleeding stars, a sword of fire that will cleanse the world. He has been preaching that Volantis will surely burn if the Triarchs take up arms against the Silver Queen. That's a prophecy even I could make. Ah, supper.
So again, we can see how Tyrion is kind of not taking things seriously. He's kind of still detached, but he's able to like kind of see directly through kind of Bonero's fanaticism and his kind of charlatanism. That's not a word, is it?
Yeah, well, more or less.
He's a charlatan, is what I meant.
I think we can go with that. Yeah, so like the Westeros equivalent of, it doesn't take a rocket scientist is basically, it doesn't take a prophecy to tell you what's going on here. You can very clearly see the lay of the land. And all these quotes is coming through the Widow of the Waterfront, Bonero is just, these slaves, it's simmering. Like this is ready to boil over.
Yeah, Tyrion's like, what do you mean she's going to burn the city? It's obvious. She has flying dragons.
Yeah, so, and like you said, Tyrion is once again detached. And we're going to see the Syvass metaphor continue in a second. We have one more quote. But, yeah, just like we said, it's, Dany has disrupted the slave trade. That's really what is at the heart of all this. It's not prophecy. It's not rumors. And we should note that the slaves are flat out inspired by Dany.
Mm-hmm. Dany is a very inspirational figure.
Yeah, they talk about her shining from afar in the earlier quote. And, Bonero is preaching to the people. Like, Dany's just as much as she's been built into this, bathing in blood demonic person to some people, she's been built up into this hero and Messiah literally Azor High Reborn, the Breaker of Chains, all wrapped up. So
we were talking about like rebellions and Dany, and we were saying that sometimes for a rebellion to really kick off, it requires a catalyst like Dany to make the first move. Or even in Dune, Paul Atreides coming into the desert and inspiring the Fremen to like make the next steps into freedom. Sometimes you need that person to step in and be a symbol and be like a beacon of light to like inspire everyone else to uprise and
just sort of be that match to spark the fire. And doesn't that fit Daenerys'
perfect metaphor?
Yeah, exactly. So what do we got next here? It's that Syvax quote that I was talking about. So just like when we were reading that TWOW chapter where he picks up the white dragon, talks about Dany and the dragons, here we see Tyrion. It says, he plucks up his dragon and says, "The most powerful piece in the game," he announced, as he removed one of Kevo's elephants. And Daenerys Targaryen has 3, it said. So the elephant is the symbol of Volantis. So he takes his dragon piece, knocks over the elephant. He's like, yeah, Dany's got 3 dragons. I don't know, like, what else you want as far as foreshadowing.
Exactly. He's looking at it like a Syvax game and saying, I want to be on the winning team. He's looking at the board and looking at the pieces and where everything is laid out and choosing the right side.
Yeah, and letting us know what's going to happen. I mean, there's only one way for dragons to knock over the elephants of Volantis, and it's going to be a Harrenhal 2.0. So we do have one more bit from Benero. We want to go into detail here about what he is telling people. And in Selhorys, I guess I should say, how do you say that anyways? I've gotten in trouble for saying that the wrong way on previous live streams. I say
Selhorys and Selhorys sometimes.
Selhorys. So anyways, so in Selhorys, before Tyrion leaves Fagon and young Griff's group to be abducted by Jorah, that's really high comedy, that whole Tyrion-Jorah dynamic. But Halden Halfmaester and Tyrion see a Red Priest expanding on the way that the Red Temple views Daenerys and the old blood of Volantis. So let's give you a little taste of what it feels like to be in the square, hearing the preaching.
"The priest is calling the Volantines to go to war," the Halfmaester told him, "but on the side of right, as soldiers of the Lord of Light, R'hllor who made the sun and stars and fights eternally against the darkness. Nyesos and Malako have turned away from the light," he says, "their hearts darkened by the yellow harpies from the east," he says. "Dragons, I understood that word," he said. "Dragons. Aye, the dragons have come to carry her to glory." "Her? Daenerys?" Halden nodded. "Benero has sent forth the word from Volantis. Her coming is the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. From smoke and salt she was born to make the world anew. She is Azor Ahai returned, and her triumph over darkness will bring a summer that will never end. Death itself will bend its knee, and all those who die fighting in her cause shall be reborn."
So it's curious the way that Benero is like working all of this up. He's presenting Dany as kind of like this messiah, savior figure, and presenting the enemy as, literally Satan, the minions of darkness, and the bad guys. So religion has always been an effective way to manipulate the masses into doing what you want, and Benero is very good at it here, and drumming up the fear, and really being like, the enemy is evil, and Daenerys is the savior.
Yeah, and it's cool how he uses the specific language of the R'hllorist worldview, light and darkness. Dany triumphs over darkness, and the slave lords girding for war is tantamount to having their hearts darkened, rather. And we're going to see in a minute,
the Pharaoh.
They talk about the black eye or the evil eye or something. So it's very polarized language. It's very unambiguous language. So later in Volantis, Tyrion and Jorah, they see the actual rebellion brewing, and this is really great because Benero is inciting rebellion with my moon meteor theory delivered via pantomime.
Meteors.
Benero jabbed a finger at the moon, made a fist, spread his hands wide. When his voice rose in a crescendo, flames leapt from his fingers with a sudden whoosh and made the crowd gasp. The priest could trace the fiery letters in the air as well, Valyrian glyphs. Tyrion recognized perhaps 2 in 10. One was doom, the other was darkness.
I mean, that's it. That's it right there. The moon exploded, brought a doom-like event and lots of darkness, and that's, if I was in a game of charades trying to explain my theory, that's what it would look like. But the more important thing is the reaction from the crowd, of course, and here is the rest of that quote.
Shouts erupted from the crowd. Women were weeping and men were shaking their fists. "I have a bad feeling about this," The dwarf was reminded of the day Marcella sailed for Dorne, and the riot that boiled up as they made their way back to the Red Keep. Halden Halfmaker had spoken of using the Red Priest to young Griff's advantage, Tyrion recalled. Now that he had seen and heard the man himself, that struck him as a very bad idea.
So as I said before, using religion is a very powerful tool for a zealot like Bonero to manipulate people. Because when it comes to the fate of the world, light and dark, things like this, it's the most important thing to people if they really believe it, so people become very emotional and invested. So Tyrion can see that it's potentially a very dangerous situation, because when you manipulate people with religion, it can lead to a pretty big mess.
I mean, it's basically like playing with wildfire, to borrow a metaphor from King's Landing. And so he considers them as an ally, the Relorist followers, and it's like, well, they actually might be more dangerous than an enemy. So
a particularly combustible ally.
Yeah, and that gives a good picture for how dangerous it is. And then here's that bit about Dany and the Dark Eye.
That Daenerys stands in peril. The Dark Eye has fallen upon her, and the minions of night are plotting her destruction, praying to their false gods and temples of deceit, conspiring at betrayal with godless outlanders. The hairs on the back of Tyrion's neck begin to prickle.
So you can see there again, Dany is being presented as kind of the savior, messiah figure versus, the ultimate evil.
Yeah, the Dark Eye, the minions of night. I mean, again, very unambiguous language. So, and that is the old blood that they're referring to.
Yeah.
The people that have conveniently sequestered themselves behind,
They are pretty bad people when you look at it, but I don't know about the minions of darkness.
Well, yeah, they're minions of slavery in any case. So, yeah, I mean, I'm on the Relorist side more than obviously the old blood side. But again, this is, George Martin loves these complexities. It's like you want to root for the Relorist, but again, Tyrion's looking at them being like, I don't know. They're definitely the kind of people that would loot a city and massacre and do all kinds of things. So moving on, we've got one thing I wanted to add. I cut this out of the quote because I like to pull really long quotes, but they're all wearing red armbands at this gathering. And anytime people are wearing armbands and yelling and screaming, I mean, it's a sign that this is headed towards a bad place. Shit is about to go down, in other words. So.
It invokes some very particular imagery in your mind.
Indeed. So, to me, Volantis looks an awful lot like Harrenhal, like I was saying. You've got this inner city. It's sequestered by huge black walls, quote unquote, just like the monstrous black walls of Harrenhal. This is a very convenient way to barbecue all the old blood at once. Like we said, if the slaves can be warned ahead of time and taken out. But as we just said, the widow of the waterfront is so in charge of things that she's like, everybody is ready. I'm their spokesperson. Like, hurry up and come.
There seems like they have a plan already.
They would be willing to. Yeah. I mean, they're ready. They have got the communication lines established between the widow of the waterfront and Bonero and the Relorus. They definitely have a way to get this going. So, all the stage is set, and here is a little taste of what it could be like with Harrenhal 1.0 from the World of Ice and Fire.
As the last light of the sun faded, Black Heron's men stared into the gathering darkness, clutching their spears and crossbows. When no dragon appeared, some may have thought that Aegon's threats had been hollow, but Aegon Targaryen took Balerion up high, through the clouds, up and up until the dragon was no bigger than a fly upon the moon. Only then did he descend. Well inside the castle walls, on wings as black as pitch, Balerion plunged through the night. And when the great towers of Harrenhal appeared beneath him, the dragon roared his fury and bathed them in black fire, shot through with swirls of red. Stone does not burn, Harren had boasted, but his castle was not made of stone alone. Wood and wool, hemp and straw, bread and salted beef and grain, all took fire. Nor were Harren's iron men made of stone. Smoking, screaming, shrouded in flames, they ran across the yards and tumbled from the wall walks to die upon the ground below. And even stone will crack and melt if a fire is hot enough. The river lords outside the castle walls said later, the towers of Harrenhal glowed red against the night, like 5 great candles, and like candles they began to twist and melt, as runnels of molten stone ran down their sides.
So the black walls of Volantis are fused stone. They probably won't melt, but the rest seems like it fits. It seems like a very similar setup,
And Black Heron was a bad guy, but not quite as bad as the slavers of Volantis. It's a whole entire slave trade that Dany will be undoing here, rather than just a guy that insulted Aegon, so Aegon decided to wipe his entire line from existence.
Right, and so this is a chance for Dany, again, to burn a city in a way that'll be, again, more easy to root for than what we saw on the TV show in King's Landing. But if you just compare this to the Harrenhal action, Aegon achieved a lot of things at Harrenhal, and it was, again, kind of ruthless because he just ended somebody's line basically just for opposing him. But in Volantis, it's going to be a more justified thing. However, accomplish a lot of the same things that Aegon did at Harrenhal. So let's take a look at the ways in which burning Volantis will be a step to the Iron Throne.
So Harrenhal was where Aegon began amassing swords to create the Iron Throne, and that's symbolism.
It is symbolism. It's pretty... I don't even need to explain that one. It's like, what does the Iron Throne represent? It represents his conquest, and this is where it started, that idea of taking up those swords, so...
Forging the 7 kingdoms into one.
And that is exactly what he did in a literal fashion here. The Riverland lords, they swore allegiance to him the next day. They're like, yeah, okay, I don't think I want my castles turned into Harrenhal 2.0. And so he had the whole Riverlands. This is when the Tullys became Lord Paramounts of the Trident, in fact. And so the other thing that Harrenhal did for Aegon was it added to his armies, because when you swear allegiance to someone, you now owe them your troops. And so Aegon's armies grew, and the same thing could happen to Daenerys at Volantis.
And also, Dany, as she often says, is just a young girl who doesn't know the ways of war. So this will prove to everybody that she is actually not just that, and that she actually can really mess stuff up if they defy her.
Yeah, it's definitely going to send that sort of same stunning, violent warning to people that Harrenhal did. This battle station is fully operational.
She's like, those guys at Volantis, they're dead now. I killed them all.
I did. I melted their city, or melted the buildings inside the city at least. So, and don't forget, this will make it, like I said, the army bigger, because all those R'hllor slaves, maybe some of the factions of Volantis that are, anti-Team Black Eye of Evil or whatever, so there's going to be a troop power-up as well as a supply power-up going on. So, like you alluded to earlier, this was a nice conclusion of that whole smashing the slave trade arc that began in Slaver's Bay. Volantis is these are the people that are growing the fattest and happiest off of this thing. Volantis is also kind of the heir to the cruelty of Valyria. Yeah. They tried to restart Valyria in the century right afterwards, and they are, the whole idea of the old blood is like, these are the people with Valyrian blood, so they've got the race supremacy going. So for Dany to end that would be kind of poetic.
It'll be a fitting ending for Dany's Essos storyline. And I've always thought it was awesome and poetic that you have the Valyrians who had this whole thing with slavery. And you've got Dany, a Valyrian descendant, coming in and undoing kind of the damage that they left behind.
Right, and it's very comparable to Aenar Targaryen pulling the inside job of the doom of Volantis, as we know. Yes. House Targaryen and the Faceless Men conspiring together to cause the doom. Shout out to my Doom video. But anyways, that aside, as we can see here, this is a nice summing up of Dany's arc. I think it will, like I said, allow her to move on from the east in a way that is satisfying. We still have the hanging thread of what's going to happen in Slaver's Bay, King Dario, or whatever else. But there you have it.
Heck yeah.
I think Harrenhal 2.0 is coming.
It seems almost certain that it's going to happen. There's a lot of foreshadowing, as you guys can see.
So with that, we'll say Dracarys.
Thanks for watching.
See you next time.